He looks like someone from the 1910s.
Don't mess with him. He's a judge. And I'm like, but then what the fuck is he doing at a crime scene? That's
Great
not
question.
how judges work.
I'm vaguely familiar with the judicial system, and I don't think they usually come to crime scenes and then execute random passersby. Welcome to You're an Child is an Idiot, the podcast where we look back on the things from our childhood and wonder if they were any good to begin with. My name is Damon.
I'm DJ. Good job.
Hello, DJ. How was that? How did I do?
It was great.
Be honest.
I
On
always
a scale from 0 to please, tell me.
I do always spring the intro on you. It's always like, you do it. So
it always startles me. And
in your
it's
defense,
like I've never been on a podcast before, despite this being our 169th. Nice.
Nice.
Which 169 is if just someone's watching, just off in the corner. Please leave. 100.
Everybody's got a kink, right? So listen, this is going to be easy for you because this is like one of your favorite movies, if I recall correctly. We're watching Roger
Friend of the
Rabbit,
show,
by the way.
LT, sprung the question on me that I've been rehearsing for my entire life. She asked me what my favorite movies are. I immediately blanked, like I had never seen a movie before. Like I was a Amish kid on Rumspringa. I was like, "What's a movie?" And
You really have been preparing for that question. You like, it's like someone asks you, like, I don't know, can you just list 24 character actors from the 90s? You're like cracking your neck and your knuckles. You're like, can I ever? And then
that's my version of a bar fight. You just see someone fly through a window, but followed behind them was the name of Bill Pullman. Yes, this is one of my favorite movies. This is one of my, also, I mean, there's part of me that cannot hide the fact that this is a nostalgic movie for me. This is probably my first memory of going to a movie theater. We went, it was 1988. We went over 2 houses down to pick up Gerald Guzak, who was coming with us, and we all went to see Who Framed Roger Rabbit in the movie theater. Gerald Guzak is a real person, but I like him also as a name because he's just enough Polishness that it's like, I know exactly where this was happening. It was Long Island. Got it. So it's one of my earliest film memories. But I'm also like a cartoonist, and I'm really into animation. And so this idea that, you know, cartoon characters are like living among us is like forever tapped into a part of my brain that worked tremendously for me.
Was that something that like you wished would come true? Like when you were little, like cartoon
before I
characters,
saw this movie?
I was going to say, because if it was, I bet this movie disabused you of that fantasy. Because
some of these characters are really annoying when you actually get them out in the open into the 3D world.
This movie is kind of scary, if I remember correctly, and very creepy and very visceral. Like, not scary like I'm scared to watch it, but scary and like they really lean into... Yeah, they really lean into the idea of like, what would it actually be like? You know, to have these cartoon characters. It'd be freaky as hell because they're like zip zapping all over the place.
They're bebopping and scatting all over me. Yeah, I remember. I think we talked about this when we watched Witches. But this is one of those movies that I loved. And you and I are both scaredy cats when it comes to movies.
Yeah.
We actually literally like when we see a scary movie, we bite our nails like a typewriter. You know. But this is one of those movies where I would show it to other people so excited, and they'd be like, this movie freaks me out. Especially like the end when Judge Doom like has his big reveal and he like gets flattened by a steamroller and is walking around. I mean, that is Uncanny Valley because he's still a 3-dimensional object. He's not a toon yet. His toonness is not revealed. So it's just like, this is some weird Gumby shit going on right now. But this is one of those movies that is scary, but like did not scare me. Whereas any movie that is inherently scary, like a slasher movie, I'm like, absolutely not. No. The trailer is my thrill ride. I'll just send Tyler to tell me what happens.
I distinctly remember when he like kills the shoe which like shows like what a threat he is, right? Because he's like got this tune, it's an innocent, and he just kills it. And that is a memory that scarred me forever. And
that is another. That's the one that also comes up a lot with this movie. I remember as a kid being blown away that Doc Brown is Judge Doom and vice versa. That I could not wrap my brain around it. That these are the same actor. That Christopher Lloyd is both characters. Both characters.
Hadn't discovered that could be done.
That a person just needs to shave their hair or wear a white wig, and that's pretty much all you need to do. I don't think I could place it. I think because they still both are not Christopher Lloyd. Like Christopher Lloyd looks like Professor Plum in Clue, at least in this era. He does not either look like Doc Brown or Judge Doom. So they're just so far on different extremes of him that I could not find the mean Christopher Lloyd. Like what is the man between these? I feel like Gary Oldman has the same problem where I'm like, what do you look like though, sir?
Yeah.
When you're not dressed as Dracula or Winston Churchill, what do you look like on a Saturday morning if I just like came over for coffee?
It's kind of like the Tom Hardy of it all too. Like they get deep into like a weird looking costume or a weird makeup or something.
Except Tom Hardy is a stone cold fox, so I know exactly what he looks like at any given moment.
Speaking of sexual awakenings, how did you feel about Jessica Rabbit?
Jessica
Did it do anything for you? Did you fake it?
No, absolutely not. I knew it did something for people, generally speaking, people.
Right. Yeah.
And I knew that was her reason for existence. But it did nothing for me. In my defense, not that I need to defend presumed homo or heterosexuality, but I was like 7, so give me a little credit.
Yeah, she also did nothing for me, but it was because it's a cartoon.
I remember like my dad would make, little. I mean, not super creepy comments, but would like, whenever Jessica Rabbit like came on screen, like he was like, his head would turn into a wolf and he would howl. Is that normal? And then he would pull his ear, and his eyes would work like a lottery jackpot thing, and then coins would come out of his mouth. Is that normal for people's dads? I'm just
that's
trying to gain just an average experience. Then he would hit his head with his shoe. I remember Jessica Rabbit being a thing, but it was I don't know. That's the part I'm most uncomfortable about this movie is like revisiting Jessica Rabbit as just a character.
I'm going to be honest. I am uncomfortable at every aspect of this movie.
Really?
It made me very comfortable when it came out. I still don't. I'm hoping that this viewing, I have not seen this movie. I probably saw bits and pieces of it because you would rewatch it or pieces of it every once in a while. Mm-hmm. Not. It was not like a
crazy person. Not like I was a serial killer.
No, it was like a movie that you liked, so you would watch it occasionally. It's okay. It's okay to like things. But like I don't have fond memories of this. I have creepy memories of this. And I'm hoping that this watching makes me sort of appreciate some of the things and not be so uncomfortable about it. Because it's not it's mostly on purpose, right? It's kind of zany in the sense that like cartoons and like especially this era of cartoon that we're kind of exploring here is, especially zany, but like what would it be like if you actually brought them into real life? It would be ridiculous and kind of creepy and scary if they were like...
One could describe it as madcap.
Zany.
Yeah.
Loony.
Hijinks would ensue.
But we watched the short not that long ago. There was... I can't remember what movie.
I think it was with Honey. Well, did we watch the one for Dick Tracy?
I don't remember.
We might have also watched the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I think is more glued to that. If you watch Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, you have to watch the short. But with Dick Tracy and the other one, you don't have to. If you're ever putting on a far off place like you would, you don't have to watch Trail Mix Up, the short that was attached to it in theaters. I think I will save this because. Much like our Lord of the Rings episode, I have a lot of knowledge about the making of and a lot of the people attached to. I'm going to
bring that in later after.
I'll bring that in later because I'd like to talk about the animation director, Richard Williams, who is an iconoclast and a bit has a particular view of animation, and all sort of the
racist?
background about like. No. He is. I mean, he seems like a very nice guy, but he has a very particular view of animation that I think really works for Roger Rabbit, and otherwise completely tanked and his career.
Oh, gotcha.
We can talk about that later. A thrilling vision of things to come and later.
A little breadcrumb. Do you? But while we're still in memories, like what is it? So. What is it about this movie that made it kind of like stick so much? Was it just the sort of combining of, because there were other animated features at this time, but this was the first, or at least the first major one around that time that like combined the two.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've talked about Space Jam. Cool World. I've actually never seen Cool World, so I can't speak to it, but everything I've heard about it has, I'll say, prevented me from seeing Cool World.
I've never seen it.
But I feel like this one, unlike Space Jam, which very much feels like a commercial, much like its origins, this feels, I mean, even though there's a lot of, IP, to use the terms of our age, that goes into this. It does feel like a labor of love, in that they were just like, I really like this era of animation.
Let's explore
Disney
it.
At this time, Warner Brothers at this time, as well as like Tex Avery especially. And I want to make a film noir movie. I want to make an animated movie and a special effects movie. And on top of that, I want it to be the best of those movies. So it's like a fairly good film noir sort of pastiche. It's a really great example of animation, like at its best. And then it's like a special effects movie. Like they really integrated special effects in a pre-CGI era. They made these characters like live amongst human beings, and it's kind of amazing to watch. I think they did everything in a level that it doesn't feel like they coasted in any way, and so it just feels like a really well-made movie, unlike Space Jam, where it just feels like you're like, when's a good time for me to sneak out of the theater to have a cigarette?
Anytime.
At any time. You know what? I just want to say this. This is not anything to do with Roger Rabbit, but one of the greatest joys in the past few years, and there have been few, is watching our generation come to a collective realization once the Space Jam sequel came out that not only is this new movie no good, but my memories of the previous movie were false.
Oh, did
like
that
watching
happen?
people realize like, oh wait, actually, now that I've rewatched it with my kids in preparation for Space Jam 2, again with this, they're like, oh wait, the first one also was a piece of shit, and I can't believe I liked it in the first place.
I didn't know that happened. I missed that revelation.
I feel like I saw a few people sort of come to that realization, maybe on Twitter or like in podcasts, where they're just like, actually, now that I've rewatched it, this isn't a good movie.
This isn't very good. If only someone had told them.
If only someone had committed it to a podcast 5 years prior.
Some brave warriors.
Some brave white men got a podcast and set it on tape.
We're going to watch Who Framed Roger Rabbit and watch along with us. We'll be right back. You all know that the animation in Roger Rabbit, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, is incredible, right? Mm-hmm. It's renowned. You know who else is a renowned cartoonist?
Jesus.
My co-host, Damon Xanthopoulos. And if you want to give a large portion of money per episode, you can get a drawing from Damon. That's the one of the higher tiers, but that's just one of the tiers of the Patreon page, patreon.com/YourInnerChild'sAnIdiot. If you want to become a patron of the show, you get drawings by Damon, you can get songs by me, you can get your name read in the credits, you can get your name written in the written credits. You can do none of those things and just get the extra episodes. We've got, I think, 8 Patreon exclusive episodes right now. There's more on the way.
If you want to learn about Top Gun Maverick,
yeah, we
become
just
a
did
patron.
Maverick. What else have we watched? The Super Bowl. If you want to hear us talk about football. Patreon.com/YourInnerChild'sAnIdiot.
Yeah, do that.
We're back. We watched Who Framed Roger Rabbit. and Damon's going to recap the movie for you, and go.
All right. You remember the movie Chinatown? Just do that, but with cartoons in it.
If I get it, Jake, it's Toontown.
Toontown. I'll keep it simple. We find out that Roger Rabbit, it's insinuated to Roger Rabbit, a famous cartoon star, that his wife may be cheating on him. He is given pictures from a private detective, Eddy Valiant, our hero. And shortly after, the man that she was playing patty cake with, Marvin Acme of the Acme Factory, you might know him as the man who supplies the Wile E. Coyote with all his tools and accessories, is killed, dropped a safe on his head, which is traumatizing to Eddy Valiant because his brother died from a piano on the head. Eddy Valiant used to be a big time Toon centric detective, private investigator. But after his brother died, he decided to have a career change to a drunk. But then he starts looking into Marvin Acme's murder, and it seems to get bigger and bigger. And he starts to think that Judge Doom, this very villainous looking judge in Toontown, might be behind it. And lo and behold, he is. And it turns out he was also a Toon and the Toon that killed Eddy Valiant's brother.
He turns out to be the most evil Toon cartoon that's ever existed. And we'll talk about that more later because I can't stop thinking about it. And my nights are filled with the horror that is Christopher Lloyd in this movie. And I'll never sleep again.
Tyler was also very unsettled by Christopher Lloyd. Yeah. I've never been, I think we talked about this in our Witches episode, but for some reason, you and I are both scaredy cats.
Yes.
If we were in the Scooby-Doo gang, we'd both be somehow in Shaggy's arms. But the weird thing is, like, the weird, creepy things in, like, 80s movies that terrified kids never bothered me. And so, like, the Grand High Witch and Witches never bothered me, and Judge Doom wasn't. I mean, I got that they were imposing. I'm not a sociopath. I just didn't recognize. I wasn't scared of
tests?
Judge Doom.
Are we sure?
That's good. With all the faces, and I have to pick out which one's the happy one. Actually,
and I remember watching this movie is part of the sociopath test.
I do take my coffee black, which is apparently also a sign. I remember watching this at Daniel DeSoto's house when I was a kid, and he was terrified at the end when Judge Doom is flattened by the steamroller and starts walking around like a deflated, used car dealership airman. And he was like, "I don't like this," and I was like, "What are you talking about? We're having so much fun."
That's probably the worst, but there's a lot of those moments in this movie. It's a very, like, for a movie that is, combined between cartoons and real and live action. There's a lot of, like, visceral, creepy, weird stuff.
I mean, it's just inherently creepy, especially like the scenes of Bob Hoskins in Toontown, to watch a person who, has the dimensions of a human being, assumably has all the organs and bone structure of a human being, watching him being flailed about like, Woody Woodpecker throughout a room is disturbing. Like in the elevator when he gets smooshed and then gets thrown about, that's bothersome to me.
Well, and they purposefully made it, like, typically before this, if you had a combination of live action and animation, I was reading about how they have these, like, rules of you make everything as 2D as possible, so it kind of, like, blends, and they specifically didn't do that. They, like, broke the rules because they wanted it to be kind of like a clashing of these two styles of, like, these two worlds coming together. And it worked because I was very uncomfortable all the time.
Well, I remember I've watched the behind the scenes of this because I love this movie. And I actually saw a documentary about the guy who was the animation supervisor on this, Dick Williams. And apparently Robert Zemeckis had gone to a lot of different animation studios at the time and been like, hey, how would I do this? And like you were saying, they were like, okay, well, you can't move the camera. Right. You want to keep things, pretty flat. You want to make sure the action is sort of controlled so we know exactly where to draw things. And he was like, I don't want to do that. I want to film a movie. And so he talked to Richard Williams, who is He seems like a very nice man, but he has very particular views on animation. And so Robert Zemeckis reached out to him and he said, "Hey, I want to do this movie, and everyone's telling me can't move the camera in this." And Richard Williams was like, "No, film your movie. We can draw around it." And he's like, "Well, why is everyone telling me I can't move the camera?" And Richard Williams, one of his most famous lines, is, "Oh, because animators are lazy, and they don't want to do that." Richard Williams, I mean, just to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, I watched a whole documentary of him, so I have all this information about him.
The minutia.
He, like, in the 70s, he started working on this movie, this animation movie called The Thief and the Cobbler, which was going to be sort of this Arabian Nights-inspired animated movie. He was working on it for 20 straight years. And in fact, he took the job of Roger Rabbit to help finance this movie that is taking so long. And it helped him keep him afloat for a while. But eventually he got to a point where he had to sort of like make a deal with Warner Brothers to help finance the movie. But the deal involved, if it wasn't done by a certain point, he had to hand the movie over to them. Oof. Guess what? The movie wasn't done at that certain point, and Warner Brothers just sort of took what he had, cobbled it together, pardon the pun, and just shipped it out. And it had taken so long that so many animators had worked on it, been fired from it, had left the project, gone on to the project, that when you got it in the video store, because it eventually was just direct-to-video, it looked like a ripoff of Aladdin because it came out around that time. But there have been so many animators that had started on this movie, and they eventually went to Disney after Disney got its feet back under itself, that a lot of the stuff that they had sort of learned in The Thief and the Cobbler sort of crept into Aladdin. For example, the evil wizard in The Thief and the Cobbler is this big blue magic-wielding creature that has like a long pointy beard. Looks very similar to the genie in Aladdin. I remember seeing it as a kid and being like, "Oh, that's just an Aladdin ripoff." But then I watched this whole documentary about him failing to get this movie made, and it's sad a little bit because he is a very good animator and he is very anti like shortcuts in animation,
right.
Keeping things flat, always keeping things in profile or 3/4 view. Like you'll see, like he has a lot of flourishes in his animation style where he makes things look 3-dimensional in ways that you wouldn't have to do in regular animation. Like the one that was pointed out to me recently was the chili bottle in the actual cartoon at the beginning of the movie, when that big shelf covered in pots and pans and one chili bottle, when the chili bottle falls, you could have just had it fall forward or fall to the side, but he has it sort of tilt in direction, like, and then sort of fall towards the camera, which as a person who casually draws, I'm like, absolutely not. I will never do that. What are you, insane? But it makes for a really beautiful animation, but it also is really complicated to do.
I didn't know that whole backstory, but that I noticed. I actually made a note here because the short, there's a Roger Rabbit. We start with a Roger Rabbit short, like one of his
in production while they're actually filming it.
And the animation is like it's in the style of like your Warner Brothers, Tex Avery, like the mix of kind of all those things, but it's very much like Wile E. Coyote, like that kind of like he's getting the shit beat out of him while he chases this baby around. And
it reminded me of Buttons and Mindy. I mean, 10 years later from Animaniacs, this babysitter having to keep track of a baby who's just sort of innocently getting into trouble.
And but the animation is like really, it's a little odd because it's very detailed and it's kind of 3-dimensional. It actually reminded me in this, I don't know if this is going to upset you, but it reminded me a lot of the Chipmunks movie. Not the new ones, but like the animated movie. What is that? Chipmunks Great Escape, or what is that called?
Oh, the Alvin and the Chipmunks? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Like the 80s movies that they used to show on TV? Yeah. Like they go to the Aztec mines or something?
Is it Alvin and the Chipmunks Great Escape or something? What is it? Chipmunks.
You're going to ruin your algorithm because it's going to be like, you mean Chipwrecked? You mean the Squeakquel?
Okay, this is
80s
a great
movie.
Tape.
Type louder. The Chipmunk Adventure is what I'm seeing.
Yes.
Is that what you mean?
I think you're right. I think that's
this looks familiar. I see these hot air balloons. I remember those.
Yeah, that's what it is. And it's like, was he involved in that? Because the animation reminded me of that, and I haven't seen that since I was a child, but that was the same vibe.
I don't know if he's involved in that in any way. Let me see.
Well, anyway, it reminded me of that.
It does have. I mean, Tex Avery also. I mean, that it purposefully has like a very Tex Avery vibe, but also, I mean, the dimensions of that kitchen is out of control. Like the kitchen, you see a full shot of it, looks like a normal kitchen, but then there's when Roger's being like flown around, it like changes so much perspective. Like the perspective doesn't even make sense. It's like purposefully distorted, so it looks like confusing. There are also a lot of in jokes in the kitchen. For example, the oven is called Hotter Than Hell oven, which made me laugh when I was a kid. I was like, oh, bad references to bad. I can't believe are we allowed to do that? Also, there was the rat poison is listed as deadly rat poison, and it's a really well animated scene. The whole thing is great. And again, like when baby Herman is like, he gets to the cookies at the top of the fridge, which was his goal the whole time. There's a loaf of bread stacked up, and he walks on the bread, and each slice like moves out from under his feet, so he can't actually gain any traction. But each slice goes one at a time. I feel like in a cheaper cartoon, it would be like the same slice over and over again. They cut away, and you come back, and all the slices are gone.
Yeah. But it was, for me, I mean, it's all very impressive, but it's also like discomforting. Like it's all continues that. Even when we're in straight animation at the beginning, I'm already like, this is weird for some reason. And it's the level of detail. It's almost like it's in that like the very beginning of the uncanny valley. Like we live most of this movie, we're just living in it. But like it's the very peak before you like crest the hill and go straight down into the rest of the movie where they yell cut on the animation, and then all of a sudden it's people and cartoons together the whole rest of the movie, which I really liked. I don't know if this is a joke, but Raoul J. Raoul. I was like, that very much seems like a name that would be on this.
No, it was like Raoul is a very specific like 1940s animation director name. Yeah. It feels that way.
What else we got here? We got, they have when he's walking through the studio, and they have a cattle call.
That was funny.
Like that was my first laugh of the movie. Was the cattle call, and they have a bunch of cows waiting to audition.
As an animation nerd, I did appreciate that. I mean, there's what sounds like a throwaway joke in Maroon cartoons, or RK Maroon, who is the head of the studio that Roger works for. He says, when Dumbo shows up, he says, I got him on loan from Disney, him and half the cast of Fantasia. And every cartoon you see is like Eddy Valiant's Leaving are like animals from the Fantasia, Fantasia, like the ostrich and the hippo from the Dance of the Hours segment. And then I think some of the little demons from the Night on Bald Mountain, he passes by them. I do really... Oh, and the brooms from Sorcerer's Apprentice. Getting a jazzy version of Sorcerer's Apprentice. Well, they sweep up with real brooms. They are themselves brooms. One thing also about the animation that I noticed, especially in the Donald and Daffy scene, I think Donald pretty much his style was already set in the 40s, but Donald's style or Daffy's style wasn't hardened yet into what we know him as now, and they drew him in the 40s style where he was a little bit more wackadoo. He's a little bit more crazy. Woo! And he's a little more tubular, to borrow a Ninja Turtles phrase. He's not as like
his head's
pronounced
longer
as he is now. His head's a little like he's almost like bowling pin shaped. A little bit like an upside down bowling pin, where his head is wide but like oval, and then it comes down to a little neck, and then his body is like a little right side up bowling pin. I do appreciate that now that I'm older. I'm like, you not only drew them, you drew them in the style they would have appeared then. And I think you also see Bugs Bunny is the same way.
Did you read about that? Because I read about that in the IMDb.
Oh, trivia, I didn't.
Which as always, big grain of salt, because there's no vetting of any of that information. But apparently that was like a bone of contention, because Disney especially, but Warner Bros. Too, they wanted like the modern, how they looked in the late 80s when they were
Right.
kind of have been revamped, or there had been 40 years or whatever of animation. They wanted them how they look now, so they did a test with a modern style animation, and then when the movie went into production, they actually used how the characters would have been in the 40s. But now that I'm saying that out loud, that sounds like an insane amount of work.
Yeah,
to,
why don't
trick
you do
executives.
twice the work to just get these guys tricked?
But it could be. I don't know.
I mean, it is funny to think about now because, Disney, I think I'm in a Marvel movie now because Disney just owns us all. Yeah. But this is the movie that more or less saved Disney animation. I think the reason they agreed to do it is because they were pretty much sort of pushing their animation department to TV. That's why we got shows like Gummy Bears and DuckTales and the like.
Yeah.
But they were sort of stepping away from feature animation after the catastrophe that was the Black Cauldron, and Rescuers weren't that big of a hit. So they were sort of shutting that side down. In fact, I think right before this movie was going into production, they sort of moved all the animators to this really terrible building on their Burbank lot, and they were like, are we gonna have jobs in a year? It was a really bad telltale sign for them. So it is funny, part of the reason that they agreed to this deal and sharing rights with Warner Brothers and sharing the profits with Steven Spielberg was because they, one, were not in a place they are, anywhere close to a place they are now in terms of feature animation. And two, I don't think they really believed in the movie. They were just sort of if you want to do this, go ahead. We'll share the profits with you. And then I think, there's a really good podcast on... I think it's called What a Cartoon, that I listened to about all these sort of sequels and shorts to Roger Rabbit that never gained any traction. And part of it was because there was this acrimony between Spielberg, who got the rights to approve anything going forward, including all roller coaster rides and anything like that. There was this acrimony between him and Disney's
it's a money thing.
Once Disney was able to sort of get back on their feet and make The Little Mermaid and get back to where the beginnings of where they are now, they sort of realized why are we working with this guy and we don't even get that much of the profits? Money. Yeah. I do recommend that episode if you are curious. What a Cartoon. They did a whole thing on Roger Rabbit sequels and the shorts and sort of the reason why we really didn't get that much Roger Rabbit going forward after this.
Because there was just two other shorts?
3 shorts after this. I think the quality is all really good on them, but they got in less and less interesting movies as they went on. So you got Tommy Trouble with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Then you got Roller Coaster Rabbit with Dick Tracy. And then you got Trail Mix-Up with the movie A Far Off Place.
What is that?
It was an excuse to clip... African stock footage in with a sort of by the numbers story about poaching with Reese Witherspoon in it. That ties into what we were just talking about.
Whoa! Wow, full circle. You can cut this out, but we were just talking about where the crawdads sing the whole drama with the author of that pretty insane story. Joanna Cassidy. We might have even talked about this in the intro. I don't remember, but I did not know. I did not make the connection that was her in this movie, the love interest.
Is she
right on top of that, Rose?
I know her because of this. Oh yeah. Yes. Oh right.
I know her from Don't
right
Tell Mom the Babysitter's
Yeah. Okay.
I think that shows our sensibilities, at least in the 80s and 90s.
Diverging betwixt them. Yes, she is Rose in Don't Tell Mom This Movie Is Here.
And also she's in a lot of stuff, but she's in 6 Feet Under, which is also a...
Oh, yeah, she is in that.
She's the insane mother Brenda. Her line... when they're talking about, Eddie, our main character is, I don't know, sulking or drinking or something. And then he's like, what's eating him? And he's like, Toon killed his brother. I just love the way she says that. Not deep like that, but it was very very funny.
I think I appreciated more this viewing the sort of noir pastiche that this is. Like, it's very over the top in like sort of the jazzy slang that keeps popping in. Who swiped my ball? I heard a kid scream that in like one of the street scenes. You hear a kid just say that. That shot is a very good one. Like, what's his problem? And then she like steps into the foreground and says, Toon killed his brother. And then everyone turns around at the bar like, huh? And then she goes, drop the piano on his head. And then they all turn around again. It's deranged. It's quite deranged. There is like, I mean, I'm very happy that Robert Zemeckis got to sort of make the movie how he wanted to make it, because he does sort of like, I mean, it is this very like almost Frankenstein together animation cartoon movie and then this noir movie, and they're both, I mean, especially the noir part is really playing up that like Sunset Boulevard, like we gotta wet the streets when we're filming for night, we gotta get it all, get more saxophones in the soundtrack please. And Alan Silvestri, who actually did the music, also I think like runs this weird gamut between these like really bluesy, jazzy songs during the live action portions, and then like completely does a 180 for these wacky Looney Tunes like soundtracks whenever there's cartoony stuff. And then there's sort of a blend together like during car chase scenes where there's like these weird cymbals and like this staccato like rhythm going on in one thing, and then just still like drums and bassoons going on at the same time. Like, this is going to split my head wide open if you keep doing this.
Speaking of things I didn't catch in previous watchings, but he's in the club where Mr. Acme is there talking to him, and
the Ink and Paint Club.
The Ink and Paint Club, that's right. And he orders a scotch on the rocks, and then as the the waiter's going away, he goes, I mean ice. And I was like, oh, that's funny. And then, of course, later he gets his scotch back in. It's got rocks in it.
Literal rocks.
But I don't think I ever caught that before.
I think as a kid it did go over my head, and then I think I asked my dad, because I was always the kid who was like, I could tell that a joke is being told, so I'm like, Dad, what's that mean? He's like, well, you know, if you get a drink you might say on the rocks to mean that you want it on ice. I'm like, and then I would probably laugh as if I was hearing the joke for the first time, because I was maybe precocious. I might have been precocious. Yes. Which is maybe why I recognize it and hate it so much now. I'm like, don't do that, kid. It's not doing yourself any favors.
It's aspirational. Like when I would watch, even as a teen watching Mystery Science Theater, I'd get probably, I don't know, 60 to 70% of the jokes, but I laughed at all of them.
It had the cadence of a joke. One thing I was surprised by, because Roger Rabbit seems, and we may diverge here, Roger Rabbit seems like a character that would get on my nerves real quick. And I'm sure in real life he would certainly get on my nerves. But he really did make me laugh several times during this whole enterprise. Mostly like with weird casual asides. When there's a scene where they're in this like back room that they used in Prohibition for the bar. And when they're sort of secreting Roger away, and Bob Hoskins keeps hitting his head on this lamp, and like the second time he does it, Roger just casually goes, "Watch your head," and it really makes me laugh, because it's just this annoyed, probably hungover man trying to hold on to a rabbit that he's currently handcuffed to, and then just a casual, like, helpful, "Watch your head."
I do like, so in that moment when they're handcuffed together, of course, when he starts taking a hacksaw to it, Roger pulls out his hand, and he goes, "Oh, does that help?" And he's like, "Yeah." And then he's like, "What? You could, why I oughta, you could," and it was so funny because he was like, "You could get your hand out the whole time," and then Roger's like, "No, only when it's funny." Like, he's got there are rules that he's got to play by. Like, he couldn't have just done it because it was like the tension of the movie demanded it. There's not a lot of that, but there's a couple little things.
I did laugh at I called the fireman. He didn't know where your office was, so I asked the greengrocer, the butcher, the baker. They didn't know, but the liquor store guy, He knew.
He knew.
Also, this is one line that I remember my brother always liking is when Roger's going through the office and he sees like Eddy keeps his brother's like desk like perfectly dusty, but like exactly the same as it was left before he died. And he goes, "Oh, who's this fellow? He looks like a sensitive and sober fellow."
Yeah.
I like that everyone is aware that Eddy Valiant is a complete drunk. And has no shame in calling him out on it constantly.
Yeah, they're like the police officers later when he goes to the scene of the murder. They're all the police officers basically just like constantly making fun of him for being an alcoholic, which is a little upsetting.
It's sad.
His brother was murdered, and he's been depressed and turning to alcohol about it.
We didn't know how to talk about it at the time. We were still calling it shell shock.
We didn't have the tools.
They do a really great transition at one point because we've already been introduced to Eddy Valiant, and he's already gone on his, snooping thing, gets the pictures of Jessica Rabbit. He borrows a camera from Joanna Cassidy's character, Dolores, which is a name that's now been ruined by Seinfeld. But he borrows the camera from her, and she says, "I haven't gotten the film developed since our trip to Catalina." And Bob Hoskins is like, "Oh yeah, that was a lot of fun. We should go back there sometime." And she's obviously bothered by it. And he gets his photos developed for his Snoop job. And like all the pictures are of him and Dolores and his brother. And then it like cuts away to the desk and does this really like amazing kind of pan where you pan across his desk. You see all these newspaper clippings, which establish why all those cops at Acme Factory would know who he is, because he was like well known. Him and his brother were well known for like solving these tune cases. And by the time it pans back, like it's morning and Bob Hoskins is asleep.
Like passed out on the,
Did you recognize Lieutenant Santano?
No, who's that?
That was the guy who wakes him up from his drinking stupor to take him to the Acme Factory. But you might recognize him as the man that Darth Vader force chokes in Episode 4. The man who was going to tell us that this space station is the ultimate power in the universe, or whatever he says. Richard Leparmentier, apparently.
That's cool.
One of your favorites. I liked when he got force choked, and then when he was in this movie. Two of my favorites.
I'm sure other career highlights. So we have to talk about, because we kind of breezed by it a little bit. On Judge Doom's first appearance, he murders a cartoon shoe, and it is one of the most upsetting.
Oft-cited, horrific.
This is one.
Things.
So this is how I imagine. Although it was kind of more of a character when the horse dies in a Never-Ending Story. I imagine that's how people are feeling how I feel when the shoe is murdered. Because I'm just like, well, he's a cute little shoe. So he like puts him in the dip, which is formaldehyde or whatever, the turpentine and mix that he's gonna unleash on
the only thing that. The only thing that may or may not, the only thing that can kill tunes, which is essentially, I think the joke is that it's paint thinner. It's turpentine, acetine, benzene, and I mean, I think that's essentially paint thinner.
When he talks about this, it's something I've never caught before, but as he's doing that, he's talking about how he's going to bring tunes to justice, and he mentions trials, and I'm like, that shoe didn't get a trial.
Yeah, what was the shoe's crime, sir? Jaywalking, probably.
Can we talk about the...
Wait, do you want to talk about Judge Doom some more? You want to just...
I guess. See, that's probably the biggest
thing. Or do you want to save that? Do you want that to be your big thing at the end?
It's not a big thing. Let's just do it. So he is... Christopher Lloyd as Judge Doom. He's... If you haven't seen it, he's decked out in like all black. He's got like a cape, and he's got... Or is it a trench coat or a cape? There's like a cape.
No,
involved,
it's a cape. It's a cape with a little... I don't know the terms for capes because people don't wear capes. So you're not at the store going, "What's this cape? What's this little piece on the cape?" It's like
you've said cape too many times, and
he has a black cape, and it has like a little capelet on top. It has like a second layer. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's a word. And then he has a big wide brimmed hat. Yeah. He's dressed oddly even for the 40s. Like he's dressed almost like an Amish man. He's got a tiny little collar. He's got like a little tiny bow tie. Like, he's very out of date even for the 1940s. He looks
And
like
they're
someone from the 1910s.
Don't mess with him. He's a judge. And I'm like, but then what the fuck is he doing at a crime scene? That's
Great
not
question.
how judges work.
I'm vaguely familiar with the judicial
Yeah.
system, and I don't think they usually come to crime scenes and then execute random passersby.
Listen, I know this was the 40s, but also I've watched My Cousin Vinny very recently. This is not how it works. But yeah, he's very, and obviously he's the villain. He's extremely
The music changes, so you know.
creepy, and then at the end, so he is of course defeated at the end. But also the way that we figure out that he is actually a cartoon is he gets run over by a steamroller, and he flattens and then gets up, and that flattened version of him. That'll be in my nightmares for a while. And then of course his eyes bugging out, because like one of the things that Valiant describes is like he remembered from when his brothers were murdered. Like he didn't know, they never caught the tune that killed his brother, but he had these red eyes that were, bull
And a high squeaky voice.
Yeah, and of course then he has this like, it's still like Christopher Lloyd's face, but then it's got the bulging eyes, and then they like
It is. It can be nightmare fuel. One of the things I noticed this time is that, because we learned from Roger, like, tunes are supposed to make people laugh. Like, that's why they exist. And this time I noticed that there are elements about Judge Doom that not over the top, but subtly hint that he is a tune himself. He does this thing in that bar scene where there's the specials menu has a French dip for 50 cents. Nice deal on a French dip. He takes a veteran's empty sleeve, because that veteran had lost his arm in the war, takes it, erases French, and then writes rabbit dip. But he writes it purposefully, pushing the chalk into the chalkboard to create, this terrible sound. I'm like, that is very kind of like toony, like it's cruel and shows like he's an asshole, but it's also like a little zany.
It's a little Bugs Bunny. You can see
Yeah,
Bugs Bunny
exactly.
do that.
It's like something like Bugs Bunny or even 1940s Daffy Duck would do, like just being obnoxious for the sake of being obnoxious. And then later in the climactic scene in the factory, there's all these balls, like because of a skirmish or whatever, these balls like fall out into these tiny little marbles, fall out onto the floor. And at one scene when he's giving this great monologue, he sort of slips on them. And as a kid, for some reason, I'm like, oh, they kept that in. That's weird. Even though I knew how this would progress. Later, he falls on them, but he does not fall on them like a human would fall on them.
Right.
He floats in space. He floats above them and sort of just wiggles his legs back and forth.
Yeah.
And they must have like rigged him up to do it. Like it was a conscious choice to like, let's make it look like a cartoon falling. Yeah. And this is the first time I've actually caught it, but it is kind of like, oh, because he is a cartoon.
Right. Yeah. And there was something else too. What was it? I can't remember. There was something else. But he also like has cartoons working for him. Like for somebody who wants to like wipe out all of cartoon kind, it was kind of interesting that he has these weasels working for him.
I mean, there are many people in history that have sided with their own oppressors, hoping to gain even a modicum of power. So it doesn't, and even Doom himself is,
Right. Well, and I mean, while we're on the subject, there's a lot of. What's the word I'm looking for? There's a lot of ways this aligns with segregation, with like having a part of town that tunes are relegated to. There's like, they're talking about building the highway to like block it off. They're talking about
taking it out from under them now that it's like prime real estate. I mean, that's a very common story in American real estate history.
Yeah. I definitely never caught that. This time I'm like, okay, this is so very familiar.
Well, even the Ink and Paint Club, I mean, it wasn't uncommon in the 40s to have places where it was white customers only and then an entirely black, talent staff for the review. Yeah.
And the wait staff, they're all tunes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that certainly wasn't uncommon. There were plenty of people buying Nat King Cole records and then voting for policies that were explicitly racist.
Right.
Not uncommon. Yeah, I mean, that is one of the more interesting things. I mean, it is, I think, you could pair it with any number of like oppressed groups, but I think explicitly it would be like, a correlation to black segregation and that way that we as white people often will, praise black people for talents in singing, athleticism, comedy and acting, and then dismiss them in any regard outside of those realms. And that's very much what tunes are treated like. They're treated like literal comic relief.
Yeah.
But then not, their needs and their own ability to govern themselves is not respected. And so you send in this man who in the end is revealed to be a tune himself, but a human man who is then just executing them at will, taking this very like draconian form of justice towards them to rein in the insanity, to quote Judge Doom.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. However, I don't know if it entirely... This often happens when there is like this metaphorical thing in movies where it's like, isn't this a lot like, what we do to queer people or what we do to black people? But then if you follow the logic of the movie, you're like... Yeah, well, I see what you're saying, and points
we're the
for
cartoons.
You.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I thought of like, for example, X-Men, where there's sort of this metaphor, oftentimes for any oppressed group. You can sort of like look through the X-Men lens, but like, there oftentimes it's queer people, or at least I've often like related to the idea like X-Men are like a corollary for queer people, but like. I don't want the government keeping track of queer people just because they're queer. But if there was a person who could control the atmosphere and create storms and fly around, I feel like, yes, it might be in our best interest.
Here comes old George Wallace Anthopoulos.
Might be in our best interest to keep track of this woman who can control storms, or this guy who shoots lasers from his eyes. Like, it doesn't necessarily... track every time if
so
you
you're
follow
in the Magneto camp. I get it.
No, that would mean I just want mutant supremacy and all humans killed, which I also... Maybe I'm an incrementalist when it comes to mutants.
Listen, moderates are bullshit, okay? It doesn't work.
So I think with like tunes, like I certainly don't want them murdered, but they are like wacky and insane. And there's like, when you get to Toontown, it does seem kind of insane.
Whew, yeah.
So sometimes the metaphor starts to crumble on itself when you like follow it to its logical conclusion.
But you'll catch good bits though if you look around. Like
Toontown is rife with like
yeah.
And this is even before the DVD pause like function. Like videotapes, like even if you got it on the right point, like the tracking bar would always be the wrong right when I'm trying to read that poster tracking bar. I'm trying to read that poster.
You did this on purpose. But yeah, the first thing that happens is the Valiant like wrecks his car and it's into a truck that says Acme overused gags.
And it was like what is
bowling
it?
Ball
Anvils and bowling balls. Yeah.
It was very good. Can we talk about just the general sexualization of cartoons in this?
You want to talk about Baby Herman's penis?
Yeah. This is a line. So Baby Herman comes to talk to Valiant, and this is the cigar-smoking, rough-voiced baby that was in the short with Roger Rabbit at the very beginning of the movie. And, of course, off-screen, he's like, yeah, whatever, toots. And he says something of, like, I've got a 30-year-old's libido with a... What does he say? Something about his penis, basically.
Yeah, Eddy Valiant goes, after his wife leaves, he goes, ladies' man, huh? And he's like, yeah, my problem is I got a 50-year-old lust and a 3-year-old dinky.
Yeah, dinky. That's the
dinky.
one I was looking for.
I do appreciate that it is a very childlike name for a penis. Yeah, it did make me, of course, naturally, it only makes me think of this baby having sex with this fully grown human woman. So that's odd. To say the least.
Don't like that.
Raises a lot of ethical questions. I guess he's an adult mentally, so I mean, I shouldn't have any qualms, but it's still a baby having sex with a woman, a fully grown woman. He's also gambling, which I'm concerned about.
And then, of course, there's Jessica.
Jessica Rabbit is probably, I mean, What did you think about Jessica Rabbit?
Well, she's not bad. She's just drawn that way.
It's a good point.
It's very sexual, very like everyone, like Valiant sees her and, you know, his jaw's on the floor, and it makes me very uncomfortable, the whole thing.
I think as a kid, I was also very uncomfortable, probably because I had no interest in what I felt like the movie wanted me to be interested in Jessica Rabbit.
She is like too, it is too, like, it is like well beyond, like, it's ridiculous in the intentional sense. Like, they went so sexualized with her that it's almost back around to like, okay, this is, I mean, it's a cartoon, right? Like, and I think most importantly, we take away from her talking about it and Betty Boop talking about it, like, Roger Rabbit fucks, right? Is that the
that is something I picked up on this viewing, is that apparently Roger Rabbit is a good fucker. As a rabbit, you would expect, actually, when you think about it. You know, rabbits are known for their fucking
frequency, not necessarily like skill.
When you know, of course, when Eddy Valiant goes to see a performer named Jessica Rabbit, he is expecting a second rabbit. Right. And of course, this humanoid animated buxom babe
it's just
comes
her last
out.
name. She took his last name.
Right, of course. I mean, she's a good Christian woman. And he goes, what does he say?
Roger.
She's married to Roger Rabbit, and Betty Boop says, "Yeah, what a lucky girl." And then later, in Toontown, Eddy Valiant's car gets stolen, and he and she, you know, there's all this wreckage in the street, and Jessica Rabbit says, "From the look of it, I'd say it was Roger. My honey bunny was never very good behind the wheel." And Eddie says, "A better lover than a driver, huh?" Like sarcastically, and she goes, "You better believe it, Buster." And I was like, "What in the hell?"
That because it's not as explicit, I didn't mind that as much. But the sexualization of Jessica Rabbit and Baby Herman just made me like just another thing on the list of things that made me uncomfortable.
Well, the weird thing about Jessica Rabbit, I mean, I feel like they are commenting on, they are sort of playing on the noir female, like, you know, the Lauren Bacall type, you know, walking into the detective agency. So they're playing that up, but it's almost like, it's kind of like in the Scream mold, where they're not subverting it. They're just sort of calling attention to it. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that per se, but, you know, when it is so overly sexualized, and Jessica Rabbit doesn't seem to really have a reason to exist aside from being this vessel for
bombshell,
heterosexual male lust. Yeah. It does get a little overbearing in this day and age to sort of see her. She doesn't really seem to have much agency or personality outside of being a femme fatale and being gorgeous.
Yeah, when it was like there's a moment where you suspect her because there's a gun, you know, that goes off and it kills Mr. Maroon, and then she runs away.
She's on the scene and she hits Roger with a frying pan.
Yeah, but it's all to protect Roger and from the actual murder. But it's also like, that's a weird way to do it.
Yeah, it's very roundabout, but she's also a cartoon. You have to remember.
That's
she does
true.
Things to make people laugh, I guess whack off.
Yeah, I don't want to think about that too much.
Can we? I just wanted to the weasels. They're. I want to talk about the weasels just really briefly. These are sort of Judge Doom's henchmen. Mm-hmm. I do like. I think he's called Lieutenant Smartass in the credits. Who's the one in like the pink suit, the main one who talks?
Yeah.
Who gets all these sort of malapropisms throughout the movie. And he says, "We got a reliable tip-off that the rabbit was here, and it was corrugated by several letters," which I think as a kid I didn't pick up on, but now I really like. He also points out that nose doesn't rhyme with walls, but then when Eddy Valiant kicks him in the balls, it makes you laugh.
That does.
But there is also a Latino or Latinx coded weasel, and I believe he's also known as Greasy in the credits.
Oh, Jesus.
Which is not, and he's very Lothario-like. He's the one who wants to put his hands down Jessica's top, he gets the booby trap on his hand. That's a little gross. And there's a Native American bullet in Eddy Valiant has a gun that he got from Yosemite Sam, has 6 Western stereotype bullets, one of which is unfortunately a Native American who does like I don't even want to do it. You know what I mean? The hand to mouth thing. Yeah. Although the other bullets I really like, because one of them is like one of the guys from Green Acres.
He's got the talks like this.
I ain't seen you from now on to 5 years.
Yeah. I also, with the weasel, I was just going back to the weasels for a second. Part of the problem there was like I couldn't understand what they were saying ever. Just the way the voice. I mean, I think, and it could have been my TV or whatever, but the mix was a little hard to understand for me. And I actually remember that, like not catching some of that before. I wouldn't have known that it was the mix, quote unquote. But I was like, this is so zany, and I'm sure he just said something that had the cadence of a joke, but I don't know what's going on.
You're right. I mean, I can't tell if it was just because I watched this a lot as a kid, so I misheard a lot of lines in this movie. I don't know if it's because it's like this arch noir dialogue was going over my head, and I just sort of pieced together what I thought they were saying.
Right.
Or if it's just like a bad mix or something. Yeah, one of the things, I mean, all the weasels are kind of funny, but you never really... You could have gotten away with 3 weasels rather than I think there's 5 of them.
Yeah.
And most of them don't have... I'm always like, whenever I'm watching, I'm always want to watch the cigarette weasel who always has at least 6 cigarettes in his mouth at any time, and he's coughing and wheezing. But you never actually get a close-up of him. He's just sort of always in the background. I'm like, what's he doing? I want to know what he's doing. And then Crazy. My brother always liked Crazy, who's the one in a literal straitjacket. Who says, "Time to kill the rabbits." Jesus. Creepy.
Jesus. There's the bit when Doom is in the bar, like looking, and he knows Roger Rabbit is there, and he's like hiding in the behind the wall, and he does the shave and a haircut. So he's just like and
unresolving it.
He knows that Roger won't be able to resist, and Valiant's looking through the wall and being like, there's no way he's gonna fall for this, and then he looks over at Roger and he's just like, he can't contain himself.
It is a good bit.
I like that. He's a cartoon.
It's funny.
What do you think of Bob Hoskins' song and dance routine?
It is. I mean, he's a Olympic level grumpus in this movie, so it is very charming to see him like sort of do this big song and dance number. I did wonder, I'm like, you still have human bones. Like, you can't just throw things on your own skull from like 10 feet in the air. You can't electrocute yourself.
I think it was because of the proximity to Toontown. He got some of that.
Yeah, he got some of that juice back.
Yeah.
Toontown, I mean, the laws of biology usually have real estate limits. Which is also one of the premises of American Horror Story Murder House, is that apparently ghosts can't leave certain real estate plots.
Yeah.
Sorry, them's the rules. I didn't come up with the afterlife.
They got kids. It's a good school zone,
I also, I'm very charmed when Roger comes out of the sewer like when he breaks into the factory and he's like holding up the weasels. He's got a gun in his hand for some reason. And he leaps. He almost does this like Errol Flynn like leap over to Jessica Rabbit. And he says, "Yes, it's me, my dearest. I'd love to impress you. But first, I have to satisfy my sense of moral outrage." Very charming. Oh, I also... there's a lot of will talk in this movie where they're trying to find Mr. Acme's will because theoretically he left Toontown to the Toons, but there's no legal evidence of that. So there's probate court talk. Kids love probate court. But I think this is the first time when I actually knew what probate was in the movie. I'm like, I assume that's something. As a kid, I was like, I can't even pick up on what that's about. But I did know that the line, "My Uncle Thumper had a problem with his probate, and he had to take these big pills and drink lots of water."
That's pretty funny.
I do like that Roger Rabbit is canonically related to Thumper from Bambi.
Yeah. It makes sense. The rabbits.
Yeah, you get it. Tyler did ask, who do you think would play Eddy Valiant if this movie was made today? And I was like, oh, probably Chris Pratt or Ryan Reynolds. Like some like stone cold hottie, not this little goblin that we borrowed from England to come over and play our private investigator. But what did you think of Bob Hoskins?
It must have been hard to act against nothing.
Absolutely.
So I think he did his level best. And he's a good grumpus.
He is a good grumpus.
So yeah, I like him. His song and dance routine was, he didn't really sing, which is kind of
almost borderline rapping.
Yeah, kind of makes it fun, and also kind of makes it go like, you can't hit any notes.
None of them. You're not gonna go for any of them.
Any of them? Maybe he did, and they were like, you know what? We don't need to do that. We can get the idea across if you just whack yourself on the head and rap. But yeah, he's a foil to Roger, and I thought he did a pretty good job. The whole, the scene where he's handcuffed Roger and he has him like under the water, like pretending to do his laundry in the sink.
Yeah,
that was some pretty good acting with where there must have been nothing there.
Well, I think there was a robot that would come up and spit water out occasionally.
Oh, nice.
That is part of it. So he was acting at least he knew where Roger theoretically would be from this big like pipe that would come up every once in a while and spit water out.
Yeah. I mean, it's no Super Mario Brothers movie. But,
no, I mean, but what is?
Yeah, true.
You get the star power of Dennis Hopper and the beauty of Samantha Mathis, and of course Fisher Stevens. I mean,
the fish,
Fish Steve.
Yeah. That's all I have on Roger Rabbit. You want to go to the
I think that's pretty much what I had as well. DJ.
Oh.
What do you think of Roger Rabbit? What's your verdict? That's the terminology we use.
It's hard for me to do the normal kind of verdict because here's the deal. The way that they animated this, the way that they put it all together is incredible. It's a feat. It was a true feat. There's some really funny bits. There's some interesting like plot twist kind of things. The play on the noir genre, the play on animation and stuff. I like all that. It's really clever. I am so uncomfortable with this movie, and I hate it. So I'm gonna have to say your inner child's an idiot because I don't ever want to see this again. I was right to be uncomfortable, and having said that, like I know that you love this movie, and I kind of know what you're gonna say, and I agree with all of it. But the end result is like, yeah, but let's not.
Well, I do appreciate you doing this podcast with me. It's been 169 episodes, so we got it. We got to put a good dent in it. Put a good dent in it. Of course, your inner child is not an idiot. DJ's an idiot, but I mean, I know what you're saying. I think, Robert Zemeckis also gave us Death Becomes Her, another body horror movie.
Yeah.
I love this movie. This movie's great. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of, we were talking when we watched Dick Tracy, which I kept saying to the point that I think I was getting a dime every time I said it. I kept saying mob movie pastiche, gangster movie pastiche, 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 pastiche. And I did make a joke at the beginning that this is essentially Chinatown. I actually tried to refresh my memory of the plot of Chinatown, and it is remarkably similar. It involves real estate, taking land, and a fair with some twists. Like there's, he gets hired to look at a guy, seeing if he was having an affair, and then it turns out like the woman who hired him, it wasn't actually his wife, was just pretending to be the guy's wife, and then that guy ends up dead. It is it's a great movie. I love it. I mean, it is a bit of a pastiche, like a noir pastiche, but I mean, it's a great, like, fun movie about animation. I feel like there are a lot of times, and we've seen it several years after with Space Jam and the like, of like, what if we did this just real shitty? And I feel like this doesn't do that. I think there is a darkness to it. which is
Yes.
maybe part of what I respond to and part of what maybe pushes you away. It is a little creepy, but I think one of the things I appreciate is that, like, yeah, I think if we lived in a world where there are cartoons around who could be bashed over the head, would be a little creepy. I love this movie. No notes, 10 out of 10. Would visit again. The service was great. I love it. It's like one of the great, like, weird. I feel like it's a little bit of a. I might have said this in the intro. I can't remember. We recorded it a month ago, but it's like one of those, like, a little not completely forgotten, but it is one of those ones. Like, whenever I mention it, people are like, oh yeah. But it's such a good movie. I love it.
Well, I think we have to talk a little bit too. Like both of us recently watched the Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers like reboot movie. That's sort of I feel like I would have to watch it again with a more critical eye after watching this, but like it's the modern version of the try-hard version of combining animation and live action. Like they're like, what if I gave a shit and like tried to make like the premise is kind of contingent upon that tension between the live action and the cartoon, and then of course in Chip and Dale they add in the 3D animation versus the 2D,
right, the computer animation,
yeah, and I it would be good to like visit that like now having watched this, because it does have Who Framed Roger Rabbit has a tremendous legacy like of just all the things that they did to pull it off. I still don't want to watch it ever again.
It does have, I mean, this is, I mean, it is weird to think about, like, there is a legacy to it that I think is sort of unspoken in that we got Disney sort of bounced back from this and had the money suddenly to make things like The Little Mermaid and then eventually Beauty and the Beast and going on from there. And then also you saw Steven Spielberg still sort of dipped into animation himself. We got Tiny Toon Adventures after this, which has a very similar premise. Both Tiny Toon Adventures and Animaniacs both have a very similar premise in that they tie into classic animation, and even Animaniacs is about like toons living in our world. There are 3 cartoons who live in the Warner Brothers tower and come down and wreak havoc amongst us.
All
like
that,
it's
like,
a very similar like premise.
Disney Afternoon stuff was like repurposed characters. You know, DuckTales is like they grabbed Donald Duck and be like, what situation can we put him in? Like Huey, Dewey, and Louie were from the the comics and the cartoons, and then Chip and Dale, and then Tailspin. They like were like, what can we do with all these IP? With all this IP,
IP and brands and franchises. It is a big, very long legacy. I mean, even Steven Spielberg at the time was not like batting 1,000 himself until a few years later with Jurassic Park. He was sort of in at least a directorial. Right? Yeah, he's all right. But he was like in a slump directorially, but producer-wise, he was hitting it out of the park all over the place. This should be remembered more than it often is, I feel like.
What do you think, everybody? Call us, 615-576-0525. You can leave a message or text us. We will take emails. Your inner child is an idiot @gmail.com.
We will take emails.
I don't know. I said
what?
we, and then I had to salvage that beginning of that sentence. So I went with we will take emails. Our people will check your emails. We get emails, so email us. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/your inner child is an idiot. We want to thank our current patrons, including
Jeremy Powlin, right at the top.
Lindsay Alice Halik.
Larissa Maestro.
Karen Kurd.
Heather Tuggle.
Travis Vance.
Demons of String and Accent.
Jonathon Tay.
Captain Jean-Luc Picard.
Lindsay Nell.
The Hands of Fate.
Dan McIntyre.
A man I met yesterday. Jackson has an unhealthy obsession with Damon.
Oh, and what a time it was. The elusive fan
Times
Gromkin.
were had.
The elusive fan Gromkin, who no one has met.
Does elusive. He exist? We just don't know. Shit on the Cartouche.
Josh Frigo.
Another person I met. The supreme ruler of this podcast. Josh Frigo is the supreme ruler of this podcast, is what I meant to say.
Dramatically placed hot dog.
Hizoner the mayor.
Beth Surmont.
David Mort.
Just Cuz.
Scalfasaurus.
Dr. Malcolm's heaving bosom.
Particle Man.
T. Smith.
And the Zesty.
Thank you all very, very much. If you want to support like them, patreon.com/your inner child is an idiot.
And I'd like to thank all the patrons who also gave us names that intrinsically must be read with a voice, like Captain Jean-Luc Picard and Dr. Malcolm C. McBosom every time. And if I try and say it in normal, I feel like I'm ripping people off, you know?
Yeah. And we're I just want to say you're welcome for not reading that in Roger Rabbit's voice. You're welcome, everyone. Please. Do you want to do a badia? That's all, folks. Since we're done,
I feel like you just did it, don't you think? In a lot of ways, you can probably just edit that to be the end of the. Oh, he does. That's his origin story, is in Roger Rabbit. He kind of likes the sound of that. That's what he says. That's all, folks.
Huh.
I will say this about Porky Pig. One thing, he's not an inherently favorite character, but I do like it when he's obviously trying to say something,
and then he
keeps stuttering on it, and then he switches it. That never fails to make me laugh.
I do like that. Good job, us getting a joke.
We've done it again.